I'd just like to welcome everyone for joining us for today's Title Topics webinar. This is ALTA's free 30-minute presentation we've been offering each month to communicate important information with our members. I'm Jeremy Yohe, ALTA's Director of Communications, and joining me today is Mike Kirby of GreenFolders. Mike has more than 25 years experience in the title insurance industry, and he will be sharing some key reasons why his title company in Utah a few years ago moved to a paperless environment. He'll also address some of the challenges to working without paper and explain some of the real-life benefits his company experienced since making the leap. And toward the end of the presentation, he will also provide some ROI analysis that you can perform to help you realize some of your company expenses and also see potential savings from going paperless. So, Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Just real quickly before starting, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, please use the chat box function in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and we will hold some time at the end to address any questions. And as an added benefit, if there's anything you missed during the presentation, or you got pulled away because of work, today's presentation will be available for download at ALTA's website, and that is alta.org/title topics. And with that, Mike, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, and welcome everyone. We thought that it might be helpful, as Jeremy and I were talking earlier this year after the Louisville conference, it might be helpful to just kind of go through some of the rationale that my partners and I went through when we were discussing the issue of moving to what we refer to as paperless files or working without paper. And so, very informally and just kind of at a high level, we wanted to provide some information today to all the participants to just discuss those issues. So, Jeremy, I'm hoping that the screen is now showing that everyone can see the full screen of the first slide. If you could just inform me that that's the case.
Yep,
I think we're well underway.
Looks great, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So when we started discussing within our company what we wanted to do with regards to this nightmare that we had, which was a lot of paper, we talked about what were the key reasons that we looked into moving to a work without paper environment. And we kind of made our top 10 list. Of course, this list is in no particular order, but quite frankly, it was simply trying to remove from our operation the commodity costs, meaning the paper, the copy machines, the fax machines, the toner, things as as simple and mundane as staples and highlighters and sticky notes. And so when we went through that list, obviously here on the screen is a list of all the things that reached our top 10, which were, again, commodity costs, increasing costs of storage of paper files. Lost files was a big one. Workflow deficiencies based on the physical nature of the file, meaning that we could only work on files that we had in our physical possession. We had multiple locations, which created multiple physical files. Oftentimes, we would find that for one transaction, we could have up to 3 or 4 different files, depending upon how many different people within our organization were working on it in disparate locations. And what we found is that the duplication of the paper that was in those files oftentimes was, fairly exorbitant. Additionally, we had a lack of audit control and transparency. We couldn't always see what people were doing within the files because there was no way to track it. We had poor and untimely reporting of actions taken on a file. Often cases, we couldn't find out anything about a file as a management or an administrative team for quite some time after the transaction had already taken place, and by that time it was oftentimes too late, and our best communication was, utilizing our title production system to see if things had actually been created, but not necessarily where they were at. we had a desire to run all of our business operations from one application. We had a 1031 exchange company and our title company, and of course, anyone that's run a business understands that your mission-specific goal of running a title and escrow business is just one small piece of trying to run your overall business. You still have things like human resources and accounting and accounts payable and receivable, and we had marketing issues that we needed to deal with, and we wanted a single platform that could allow us to do all of those things, from one place. Additionally, we had the desire to grow our business, which essentially, the key was to do more with less, and the desire to reduce our expenses, which was to eliminate costly waste. And if I were to take all of these 10 items and push them down into 2 goals, those were our 2 goals, which was do more with less and eliminate, costly waste. So at that point, we decided to go through our challenges, and what are the challenges that we had to overcome. And we found that finding a paperless solution that actually allowed us to stop using paper, meaning it wasn't paper dependent, which I think most people would find are scanning systems, where everything was assume that you're going to have the paper first and then scan it back into the system. We had to get past the myth that scanning-based solutions or solutions that depended upon scanners were really paperless. We had this dream that you didn't ever have to print the paper unless you were either forced to by a government regulation or asked to by your ultimate customer. So we also had to deal with a false management perception that the adoption rate by our employees would be something that we couldn't deal with. What we typically found out when we started out, we thought that our younger employees would adopt it very quickly, or adopt a solution very quickly, and we thought that our older, more seasoned and veteran employees would be the ones who would actually be slow to adopt. We truly found that was just the opposite. I can't prove or give you any real facts around why that was the case, but I have a personal opinion that our more seasoned and older employees had a better understanding of what they did on a day-to-day basis. So all they really had to learn was or adopt was a new way of thinking about paper, whereas oftentimes our younger or less seasoned employees were caught up in learning their job as well as learning a new concept of reducing paper. So that, to me, might have been one of the issues. The other thing that we had was false employee perception, meaning that right off the bat, our employees just automatically assumed it would be difficult to remove the paper from the organization. And instead of asking the question, can we do this, oftentimes they just defaulted to, we can't. And so a lot of times we had to talk to our employees about, the concept of before you say you can't, you might want to think about why you can't. And if you really can't, then that's legitimate. But if you really can, then why not, give it a shot. The other thing we did is we ran into a lot of overthinking the process, not understanding the end from the beginning. We got caught up in a lot of issues where we thought there was going to be a problem because we didn't understand what technology could do for us. So we just assumed because we didn't know what we didn't know that it wouldn't work. And until we actually got into it and started working with it and trying it and listening to the people who were counseling us, we struggled. Once we kind of took, the proverbial leap of faith that that this type of an environment was attainable, it seemed to progress, quite quickly at that point. And then, of course, old habits die hard. Sometimes we just are destined to work harder, not smarter. I think, everybody is accustomed to paper. It's something that's been around for, thousands of years or 1,000+ years. And sometimes I think we just assume that that's the way it has to be. And I think you can get around that. We had some hardware expenses. We went to dual monitors, and we had to accommodate those. A lot of our computers didn't accommodate dual monitors, so we needed to purchase some video cards to accommodate dual monitors. But we found that those costs quickly were solved or satisfied by the efficiencies and the time savings and, quite frankly, the savings in cost. We had some public infrastructure deficiencies. Some of our remote locations didn't have a speedy internet connection, and so sometimes when we were communicating, I'm sure everyone has probably experienced that, sometimes when we were communicating that was difficult as well for the slower remote locations. I think, that was in the beginning, and now 5 years later, most of those internet connections, at least here in the States, we found that those problems have been solved. And then last but not least, we ran into a lot of operational inconsistencies from office to office. We actually found them. This was actually not necessarily an obstacle, but this turned out to be a benefit, that we found that some of our offices were very territorial and they did things the way they wanted to do it, even though our company policy in some cases forbade them from doing so and required them to do something different. So that actually turned out to be a plus. What were the benefits of moving to a work without paper environment? Here are the things that we experienced quite rapidly. From just a sheer supply savings or commodity cost savings, we saw an approximate $30 per file cost savings increase immediately just from the hard costs of the commodities. A lot of times we don't think about the paper in the way that we should, but if you think about the act of printing all that paper in a title and or escrow or both files scenario, oftentimes you don't think about what you're doing. There's, I walk into shops all the time and see, 6, 7 copy machines. So those are not cheap. Fax machines, laser printers on each person's desk. If you're not printing the paper, you also don't have to have those types of things. The decreasing cost of paper file storage over time was, greatly outweighed by the electronic storage costs. The slight increase of electronic storage costs was greatly outweighed. I put some numbers in there in green. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are just basically what we found in our own company. Lost files. This was probably my biggest pet peeve. It drove me crazy. We seem to get email broadcasts every day, numerous email broadcasts that simply said something to the effect of, can you please take 5 minutes and look in your area to see if you have this file, and if you do, please bring it to me. I have a closing in 5 minutes, or in 30 minutes, or in an hour, or later today. That would drive me crazy. Our workflow deficiencies based on the physical nature of the file were also a problem, because we had a title operation that was in a different location than a lot of our settlement offices. Oftentimes there was a duplication in work, and there was a slowdown because in some cases it was hard to get the information we needed to from one office to the next. Multiple locations created multiple files. We had a lack of audit control and transparency. Nearly every action now in a file is now tracked for us, and so that worked out very well. We had poor and untimely reporting of actions taken on a file. In this day and age where everyone talks about the need for more solid trust accounting protocol and procedures, in our case, there were times when our reconciliation wasn't being done for quite some time on the files, just due to the physical nature of the files and getting that information out, even though we had the ability to utilize our title and escrow production system and third-party utilities. Oftentimes, the people who were helping us with that reconciliation process needed to see the file, and that would take time. And of course, the desire to run all of our business operations from one application. It gave us the ability to do all of our title and escrow, our 1031 exchange, our human resource files, our marketing files, our inventory, our IT control files, our accounting files, our trust account monthly reconciliation files. We can now do that all from one platform, and that was very helpful for us. And then again, reiterating, our desire to grow our business and our desire to reduce our expenses kept us, moving forward. So, kind of as a recap, not to bore everyone, 5 years later, we're still analyzing the data and constantly changing our business process to be more efficient by leveraging our paperless technology. And two things we've definitely realized is that we really can do more with less, and we can substantially eliminate costly waste. And here are the areas that we've seen that we've been able to grow our business, and here are the areas that we've been able to see where we can eliminate our waste, and that's kind of how we broke them down. So for today's presentation, one of the things that we thought would be helpful, sometimes we overlook as owners or employers or even managers and operators of businesses, what are the costs, and how do we come about creating some real data for ourselves that can help us in determining what we should do by way of creating or adopting a platform that may be able to help us in our business. So to that end, I've created some slides here, and I'll kind of slightly explain each one. And what I would recommend to the audience is that you take each one of these slides and apply it as you see fit. And I think by doing so, it'll help you come up with some real numbers around what you're spending today in order to run your business if, in fact, you haven't adopted an environment where you can start to eliminate the paper out of your organization. So, what's the ROI? What is your ROI? Can your company afford to continue with paper files, or is it time to start working without paper? So to that end, the objectives here would be to identify your expenses, agree upon your costs, build a case study pre-technology, apply technology in the areas of file or folder management, communication management, build a case study post-technology, and provide a realistic ROI. That would be what we're trying to get at, right? And all of this is to strengthen your bottom line. So first off, let's identify your expenses. So as I look through it, most of the time I think payroll, benefits, and taxes seem to be the most expensive part of running a business. And then you have office space and rent and utilities. And then you have communications, whether that be courier or mail or phone or internet. You have your commodities, which are paper, toner, office supplies, your equipment, marketing and advertising, short and long-term, secure and compliant storage. All of it is the difference between staying in business and going out of business. You need to manage those costs on a consistent basis and always be looking at them. So what I did is I went in here and I said, how can I help everyone else kind of do this? And so on this slide, we talk about, what is the average hourly wage per employee for payroll, salary, benefits, and taxes. And the formulas that I used here were basically you take dollars per hour plus 20% for benefit and taxes, assume a 40-hour work week with 52 weeks in the year, and that'll basically give you your dollar per year per employee. So if you have an employee that you pay $22 an hour, they're basically costing you just for salary, benefit, and taxes somewhere near $54,912. So what I would suggest is that you take this yourself, and I've given a bunch of different examples here. We're going to do a few polls at the end just to see what the average is throughout the whole group here. But you apply this appropriately and get your number and then multiply it by the number of employees you have, and that's going to tell you what you're paying per year. Obviously, all of the stuff you could find on your P&L or your balance sheet, but here's an easier way to kind of go and look at it. Next is, what is the average cost per square foot for office space and utilities per employee? Assuming a full-service lease, again, formula is price per square foot of your office space, and you assume that there's 100 square feet per employee and 12 months per year. So there's your average per year cost per employee for your office space. Next one is, what do you spend on communications per employee, meaning couriers, mail, phone, internet. Consider the number of couriers you may have or your expense for courier service, your outgoing postage, your FedEx, your UPS, your cell phone service, your phone service, your internet, and then apply this accordingly, and you can get a figure there on a per year basis. What do you spend on office-based commodities per employee? Take into consideration all the paper, toner, manila files, labels, office supplies, etc. And essentially the formula here is you take the number of files processed per employee per month, and the cost of the commodity is based on the number of pages contained in each file, and 12 months in a year, and that equals your yearly cost per employee. Now, you know, a lot of the large underwriters tell you that in order to be profitable, at least this is what I've heard, in order to be profitable, you need to be able to process between 15 and 17 files per full-time employee per month. Not close that many files, but just process that many files. As I've gone out into the industry, I've seen that that number is more realistically between, not saying that they're wrong, just simply saying that when we talk to people about how many files they process full from start to finish each office, we find that that number is typically somewhere in the range of 12 to 15, not 15 to 17. But for these purposes, I've given some examples at 8 files per full-time employee, 9 files, 10 files, 11 files, and then I've given the example that each file contains either 350 pieces of paper or 600 pieces of paper, or it should be 700 pieces of paper. And the idea here is not to just consider what ends up in your file, but all of the paper that you print, meaning everything you do to create your product, all of the copies that you provide to the lender, to the buyers, to the sellers, to the real estate agents, etc. All of the copies that you waste because maybe your lending package gets modified 3 or 4 or maybe even 7 times before it actually is done. The number of settlement statements at 4 pages apiece with the new RESPA HUDs that you print prior to everyone coming into agreement on what it's really supposed to look like. You start looking at all of those, the idea of printing 350 or 700 even pieces of paper is not really that far out of the question. And then you take that and you multiply it by 6 cents a page, and most people would say, well, wait a minute, I don't pay 6 cents a page for my paper, but I think if you took into consideration and you average it out for paper, toner, office supplies, you probably are going to be pretty close to 6 cents a page. Next is, let's see if we can get to the next slide. What do you spend on marketing and advertising? And again, I think, you know, these are all pretty self-explanatory, and I'll, you know, leave it to Jeremy to send out the slide. If you want to use it, great. If not, hopefully it can give you some idea of how to kind of go through the exercise on your own. And then what do you spend on short, long-term, secure, and compliant storage of your created files? You know, at both, you know, at all of the national conferences that I've attended over the last few years, there's always someone talking about, you know, secure, compliant storage. And this is where it starts to get, you know, fairly expensive, even if that secure and compliant storage might even be a secure warehouse where you're storing the paper files. That can get pretty expensive per, you know, per file, per employee, per year. So with that being said, I'm going to actually go backwards, and I'm going to try to attempt to do some polling here just to give everyone some kind of an idea of, you know, of what the audience, the average across the audience might be. So considering the slides that we just went through, I'm going to conduct a poll here that says, for example, what is the average wage per employee for payroll that you pay at your company? By the way, this doesn't keep track of anything. We're not trying to get any information. I don't have access to these polling results. They're all from the ALTA. This is more for everyone else here. Feel free to go ahead and vote. I'll give it here just a second, and then we'll take a look and we'll share the polling results. So we'll go do a little quick countdown, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll share the poll results. And did we get those there, Jeremy?
Yeah, it closed out really quick, but it looked like most people were in the second or third category, B or C.
Right. So somewhere between $32,000 and $34,000 a year per employee is what they're paying on payroll. So let's go to the next question. What is the average cost per square foot that you're seeing? We'll conduct that poll as well. So go ahead and start there if you would. We'll give it a few minutes here. So really quickly, Jeremy, any ideas on where that one is ending up?
I actually can't see it being populated.
So it looks like, let me just end that and share the results there.
It looks like a C.
Fantastic.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, A.
Yeah. So either A or C there. We'll end that. And let's go to the next question. What is the average cost per square foot for office space and utilities? That's not the right one. Let's go to the next one. What do you spend on communications per employee? This is a little bit more difficult one. We'll go ahead and conduct this one. Any ideas? We'll end that one, Jeremy, and looks like with
$2,400 per year.
yeah. And we'll go to the next one. But I think people are, the idea here is just to get people thinking in the right direction about, what they should be looking at. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to one down here. This one I think is, an interesting one right here. Anyone? Can you see that one?
Kept short and long term.
Yeah. So this is, there's a lot of people that have paper-based file storage or, cloud storage even for that matter. So I think it, gives you an idea that what you can do is you can take, these polling numbers, and you can create your own spreadsheet that essentially outlines what you're actually paying as a manager or an owner of a business, and that gives you a real figure to compare against what a new solution, say for example, might cost you to move to a work without paper environment. And that, I think, helps with the overall concept of trying to determine what exactly you need to look at in order to make that decision. And I would tell you that there may be people out there that decide that they're not ready to move to a work without paper environment. But until you actually go through the motions of taking a look at what it's actually costing you, you don't know. And to me, the most dangerous thing out there is what we don't know, and what opportunities we're not aware of that can help us run our businesses in a more efficient fashion. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, but that pretty much ends my presentation, Jeremy.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the overview on your trek in going paperless, and hopefully everyone thought the kind of ROI information was useful. As Mike said, if anyone has any questions, please submit them via the chat box. Mike, it looks like Mark Holly has a question. Have you ever created a spreadsheet to perform the ROI?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Mark, great question. Nice to hear your voice. You should have it, Mark, because I think we provided it at a TLTA jointly. I think we created it together. But I would be more than happy to pass that spreadsheet on to Jeremy, and he can send it out as part of the presentation. That you can just plug in those numbers right into the spreadsheet.
Come on, Mark. He says he lost it, so he's going to need a follow-up email, Mike.
No problem. Jeremy, would you like me to send that to you so you can send it out to everyone, or do you want me just to send it directly to Mark?
You can do either. You might send it to me as well, and that way if we have any other inquiries, I can take care of them.
You got it. Happy to do it.
Great. And as you can see, if you'd like to follow up with Mike later, his contact information is on the screen, as is mine. And as a reminder, today's presentation will be available for download later this week. We just have to get the recording and get it uploaded. See if there's any other questions coming in. One more. We have another one from Ryan. How long of a transition is it to go paperless? Good question, Ryan. Mike, can you take care of that?
Sure, absolutely. You know, what we see out in the marketplace, I can tell you with my company, for my settlement operations, it took us about 30 to 45 days for kind of widespread adoption. Believe it or not, in my title operations, it took 9 days. I know that sounds a little crazy, but it was very quick, and they were quick to adopt. What we're typically seeing is between a 30 and 60-day transition period, and that's mostly because old habits die hard, right? But to move from an environment where you are dependent on paper to an environment where, you know, paper just is a means to an end, we see, you know, 30 to 60-day transition time max.
All right, Mike, and a follow-up question to that response. You'd mentioned 9 days to adopt. Was that a small office, larger office?
It was a title operation at the time of about 27 titled people. Again, the adoption we find across, believe it or not, what we find is that there are a lot of people who currently are saving a lot of their correspondence that comes into them electronically already. So the adoption of moving completely to an electronic environment is much quicker and easier. I read an article recently that said if you're in a clerical field in the United States of America doing business, that just under 84% of all of the correspondence that you receive or all of the documentation you receive on a transaction comes to you electronically. The sad part is that over 90% of all that documentation gets printed out onto paper, which really kind of blew me away, right? I thought to myself, you know, we're already 80+% there as to where we're communicating, but then 90% of the time we end up printing it out on the paper. That seems a little strange to me. But if you sit back and you think about it, it really isn't that strange because we watch people do it every day. So what you want to do is you want to try to, you know, condition your people and get them thinking in the thought process of asking 2 simple questions every time they receive a piece of paper. Those questions are, you know, number 1, do I really need a hard copy of this piece of paper, you know, or this document? And if the answer is no, that's pretty simple. If the answer is yes, the follow-up question should be, do I really need a hard copy of this document right now? Because if you don't need it right at that moment, meaning you can work on it on your computer, you can use your computer to work on it, the only thing that you're doing by printing it out is A, creating the need for a storage receptacle, and B, giving yourself an opportunity to have to reprint it later because it changed. So the adoption, getting back to the adoption question, I think if you're already comfortable with saving documents into like a Windows environment, the adoption of moving completely paperless is a lot easier than people would perceive.
Great, thanks. Great answer, Mike. We are up on our time, but there was one more kind of tangent question on that. And Mike, you were talking about if not printing out the document right away, and if you could just work on it on the screen. One more quick question, and the person says that they're not in IT, and so they want to know if there's any programs that allow you to mark up the document on screen so you don't have to print.
Well, sure. There are all kinds of programs out there, from free software all the way through you know, software that you can buy. You know, I think that the one that everybody is familiar with that's been out the longest, obviously, is Adobe. It's, in my opinion, a little expensive, but it's out there. You know, GreenFolders, not to plug my own product, we have built-in annotation tools right into the transaction, so you can mark and work with documents. But I can tell you, you know, go out and look for annotation tools on the web, and I think you're going to find them out there.
All right. I don't see any other questions, so I guess that will bring us to the end of today's presentation. Mike, thanks again for joining us, and I hope all the listeners found the webinar useful.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.